Hello everyone, welcome to Dnyanadeep. In this UPSC Simplified series, we are going to discuss one ethics PYQ. This is from 2023 paper. Read the question. It is saying, what do you understand by moral integrity? Fine. One word which is given here is moral integrity and professional efficiency in the context of corporate governance. Fine. So this is something you need to keep in mind. It is not asking on day-to-day integrity or integrity in government services. It is more about corporate governance. Fine. So this is something we need to keep in mind, and we have to write on moral integrity and professional efficiency. Typically, we have to quote Indian example because it is saying in the context of corporate governance in India, and it ends with illustrate with suitable example. Fine. This is a wonderful question which is expecting you to be very thorough with the certain ideas when it comes to ethics, such as moral integrity and also professional efficiency, which will go on aptitude wala part. Fine. So if you want to link these particular words with that of syllabus, I have given you dimensions of syllabus. So there are ethical concerns and dilemmas, something which is involved in the earlier part, that is moral integrity. Then later part, that is professional efficiency. It is nothing but aptitude. When it comes to one more dimension which we are finding in this particular question, that would be corporate governance. So we have to write everything with the perspective of corporate governance, and in the end we also can write something or else about civil services value. Why I am putting civil services values here? Because when it comes to civil services values and values which we need to carry as a employee or as an executive in corporate is going to be more or less same. Fine. It is not going to differ as such. By and large, context may differ, but values are going to be largely the same. Fine. So that is why I am also trying to identify what civil services value might go in here. So these are the dimensions in this particular question. Now, when it comes to introduction, first understand why this particular question has been given. Now, when it comes to corporate governance is very, very important for economic development of any country. At the same time, it is equally important for the benefit of consumers. If there is proper corporate governance or ethical corporate governance, it will benefit in creating a very competitive economy, a free market, which will then come up with good ideas, good products, and help both consumers and the market immensely. And that is why corporate governance is important. If there is absence of corporate governance, that would lead to corruption in corporate sector, and which is again is going to have undesirable impacts, because as there is a corruption in corporate sector, it may result into certain uncertainties in economy. So that is why we need to be very thorough with corporate governance. So from that particular perspective, I have just given you what this corporate governance is and why this corporate governance matter. Once I have understood why this corporate governance matter, then only I will be able to write introduction this for this particular question. So what I am trying to say, see, corporate governance on which is based on ethical values, it will ensure what? It will ensure free and competitive market economy, first part, and it will also deliver maximum value to investors as well as consumers. So that is the ultimate goal of corporate governance. Why we want ethical corporate governance? So as to have maximum benefit or maximum value for the investors, the people who have invested in that particular corporation or company. At the same time, the consumers on the other end who are going to buy a product from that particular company, it also needs to be valued immensely from these corporates, and that is why we need corporate governance, in absence of which a lot of money will be lost by investor, and the products which are produced by a particular corporation may harm consumers as well. Fine. So here I have set in a context. So this is how I am going to introduce. Now let us think about other ways on which you can introduce in this particular question. Many might prefer to directly define what moral integrity is and what professional efficiency is. That can be one way to go forward to. Another way can be to define what corporate governance is. Fine. So that is also another way to go forward with introduction. But when I go for definitions, let's try कि ये वाला moral integrity and professional efficiency, we are going to write definitions for these two terms. Now, what is the problem when I write definitions for these two terms? Because I anyway have to elaborate these two concepts later in my body part. Fine. So that is why I'm not going to directly start with moral integrity or definition of moral integrity or professional efficiency, because that will not give my answer a proper structure. Fine. So then you might go for like definition of corporate governance, but again it will be a very broad introduction. It is not going to hit for the requirements of the question. So what I am doing, I am just drawing inspiration from the idea of corporate governance. I am refining it and I am putting it in a way where I am explaining why corporate governance is important or why corporate governance is necessary. Okay, so that is my introduction. Now moving next, let's think about body part. Now I have made two parts in body. One where I'll be addressing moral integrity, and in another part I will be addressing professional efficiency. Now what you are supposed to do in this particular question, you will have to write a very crisp definition. Fine. In very crisp language, in very crisp word, short words, you will have to first say what this moral integrity or professional efficiency is. Fine. So here I have says, you see, doing right thing when nobody is watching is what moral integrity is. Right. While preparing, you will have to prepare these small and simple definitions on each and every single concept in ethics paper. Fine. So have it handy. In exam hall, you really cannot come up with a definition, or whatever definition you come up with in the exam hall conditions, these are not going to be very proper definition. Fine. So whatever keywords are there, whatever concepts are there in the ethics paper, make sure that you are having very crisp and clear definitions of all the concepts, all the keywords in GS4 paper. Now, once I have definition, I have just said what this moral integrity is, part 1. Now, in later part, what I am going to do, I will say with explanation, explain further what this moral integrity is. Okay? Merely writing a simple crisp definition is not going to be sufficient. It also demands certain explanation. So, if you read the question, it is saying, what do you understand? Right? It also has to reflect your understanding on moral integrity. Fine. Now, while explaining what this moral integrity is, what I am going to say, see, we have something called as corporate governance. And what is that corporate governance? It ensures that whatever day-to-day, short-term or long-term activities which are taking place in any corporation, in any private organization, it is based on ethical values. Each and every single employee, be as an individual or all the employees collectively as an institution, follows a very professional and ethical conduct, right? So that is what corporate governance is going to provide. Now, corporate governance comes with certain rules, maybe code of conduct or code of ethics. But even after having a lot of rules, regulations and laws, what happens is there are certain gray areas. When there are certain gray areas where there is nothing defined, nothing concrete, in those gray areas, what happens? Sometimes many large corporations as an institution or as an individual try to make maximum benefit out of that gray area, and ultimately such acts result into loss to the investor or harmful conditions for the consumer. Fine. So that is what the condition where moral integrity is required. So corporations as an individual or as an institution should necessarily think on what is right or what is ethical conduct. So doing right thing when nobody is watching, when there is gray area, these corporations must do right things. So that is my idea of moral integrity in corporate sector. Now, having made having explained on moral integrity with the help of corporate governance or the idea of corporate governance, I have said the idea in here. Now I further have to illustrate this particular idea with a suitable example. Now, since it is talking about India, you will have to strictly provide examples from India only. So here I can give example of Satyam. If you go back in time in 2008-2009, there was one scam which was unveiled in Satyam Computers. So that is one of the first few cases where we found that the integrity was lacking in corporate sector, and that became a very huge question towards corporate sector or governance in corporate sector, and a lot of initiatives were taken as a result of that. So that is something you are going to quote. But what is the problem with this particular example? Because each and every single person is going to quote the same example. It is given in a lot of textbook. It may become very redundant. Examiner may end up giving you average numbers. So I can go for Yes Bank's example, recent examples. You will see Chanda Kocher's case in ICICI Bank. No, I'm not going to explain what exactly has happened in all these cases. You can go and Google search why these are considered as in terms of moral integrity in corporate governance. You will very well get why I have put these examples here. These are some examples from India. Then you can also quote some examples such as Apple's battery gate example, or it is one of the most famous case in recent years where Apple tried to push such a software update which resulted into rapid battery drain of iPhone users, so that these iPhone users would discard their existing iPhones and would go and buy new iPhones. So that kind of strategy was played by Apple. So for that context, it was very much in news. Again, Volkswagen emission case is one of the best example to quote in moral integrity wala part. So that is about moral integrity. Moving on to next part, that is professional efficiency. Now first, when it comes to professional efficiency, you will have to define again. So professional efficiency is the ability of a company to achieve its goals using resources efficiently. Maximum resource utilization or utilization of resources with maximum efficiency will what be called as professional efficiency. Now this applies at both of the level. As an individual employee of an organization, I need to be efficient professionally, and as an institution whole, again we need to be very efficient, right? So that is what professional efficiency would mean. So I have given you what all we need to consider: using resources optimally, making effective decisions, having competent management, producing the greatest amount of work with the least amount of time and effort. So these are going to be applied at institution as well as individual level. So that is my professional efficiency. Moving further, if I have to illustrate the problem of professional efficiency in the context of corporate governance in India, the best example I can quote here is the startup ecosystem in India. Be it India or across the globe, the startup ecosystem is notorious or has been found to be very inefficient when it comes to utilization of resources, or often it is found that there is not much of a professional conduct towards achieving resource optimization is there, right? So that is something, a very generic example, a broad example you can quote here. Startups in India, though all across the globe there is a problem with startups, but when it comes to the problem of corporate governance, Indian startups are becoming notorious day by day. You must have learned the examples such as Byju's and all. So there are n number of examples you can quote here. So I have I have tried naming startups, but I have mentioned some common problems that most of the startups are not able to file their financial reports because they are not having professional efficiency in their day-to-day conduct. Similarly, their ability to use resources is very dismal. Investor money is being used without any accountability, and all this will count as professional inefficiency or professional efficiency problem. Fine. Now these are the examples with which I have illustrated problems of professional efficiency or problems of moral integrity in this particular question. Now understand one more thing, why I have quote some negative stories only, just as to highlight what problems we are going to face when there is lack of moral integrity or professional efficiency. Fine. So I have quote negative examples. You can additionally quote positive examples as well. You can quote some examples where there was a case of moral integrity. You can quote example where there is a case of professional efficiency. Fine. So it is going to be very subjective. You can quote both of the example or you can quote either of the example. Both is fine. I'm not going to quote both of the example if there is paucity of time or word limit. Fine. But nevertheless, what is most important, you need to understand, most important part will be to explain these ideas in a very crisp format and illustrate them with the example. Fine. So that was one question. Just see what I am going to conclude with. So what I am going to say in conclusion, to have a strong corporate governance, what we need external regulations as well as internal regulations. So government of India needs to come up with better corporate governance laws, that is external regulation. Also, these institutions need to take responsibility onto themselves so as to provide better corporate governance. So that is again I have written here internal and external regulation. Now at the level of institution or at the level of an individual, at both levels we need corporate governance. So that is all about this question. See you again in next session. Till then, have a good time.